Thanks for joining. My name is Tom Roberts. I'm the Global Director of PMG with the International Code Council. As I said, I'm based in Australia, so my focus is very much international with a plumbing, mechanical, gas fitting focus. Prior to that, I was with the Australian Building Codes Board, so I worked at the federal level for the Australian government, doing everything codes and standards and product certification. I'm also the chair of the Australian and New Zealand Standards Committee that are responsible for the plumbing standards in Australia and New Zealand. And I'm a board member for the Unified Water Label Association, and so is Tom, so we'll touch on that a little bit as we work our way through. Tom, you're the CEO of the Bathroom Manufacturers Association, but I'll hand over to you to give a bit of an introduction around your background and what you do in the UK, and then we'll delve into all the excitement of the Windsor Declaration in the summer.
Yeah, certainly. So, I'm Tom Reynolds. I'm the Chief Executive of the Bathroom Manufacturers Association, which, as the name suggests, is the trade body here in the UK for manufacturers who supply the UK marketplace with all the wonderful things that go into the bathroom. So, taps, toilets, basins, baths, and so on and so forth. In addition to that role, I'm also the Vice President of Taps and Valves Europe, which is called CEIR, the European Taps and Valves Association. So I've kind of got a foot in both markets, both the EU and the UK markets. Our remit as a trade association at the BMA is really around three areas. Firstly, raising standards, and we're actively involved in standards development through SEN, ISO, and here the BSI. Secondly, helping our members to reduce their environmental impact, and clearly, given that we're interested in the bathroom, we major on water efficiency in that area, but also touch on things like carbon measurement and so on. And then the third area is helping our members to understand the market and grow the whole market. The theory being, if the pie is bigger, then everyone's slice of the pie is bigger. So we have various different initiatives around that. But the Windsor Declaration is very much fits within that second strand of helping our members to reduce their environmental impact.
Thanks, Tom. So we'll delve into what is the Windsor Declaration and then what happened at the summit and all those exciting things a little bit. But one of the first things I wanted to touch on is water scarcity. So it is a big focus of the declaration, but it's an issue that everyone's been talking about for many years. It's a problem that's only getting worse, even though there's a lot of active efforts to solve it. So I wanted to kind of frame the problem and introduce World Water Awareness Month from the ICC's perspective and why it's such an important topic for us. So around the world, fresh drinking water is quite inaccessible. A lot of countries around the world are very fortunate enough to be able to turn on a tap and have drinking water, but even in developed countries like Australia, US, UK, that there are problems. So access to and enough volume to cater for a growing population is a big problem. And changing climatic conditions and seasonal variations and extreme weather events throwing added challenges into the mix that we haven't had to deal with before. Anyone in the plumbing industry would be familiar with the water problems in developing countries and all the active efforts to try and solve issues there. But those issues are only getting worse and exacerbated by the same effects that are impacting the developed countries and those that might have the infrastructure to trying to provide clean drinking water. So there's a real need for awareness of these problems. I think we get a bit complacent in countries where we do have access to clean drinking water and you can turn a tap on at any time. So it's good to remind ourselves each year of the problems that are facing those types of economies, but as well as the developing countries as well that don't have the same luxuries as the developed nations. So I did want to frame that as the focus of World Water Awareness Month to introduce the celebrations and the topics that we'll talk through each week through the ICC's promotions. But really just to frame of why it's such an important issue and why there's continual work happening in that area. Tom, I wanted to come to you and ask from your perspective, especially in the UK and the EU, as well as the US, can you tell us a little bit about the water scarcity problems and what are the issues being faced by those countries? And we'll delve into those a bit more technically.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Well, firstly, I really welcome the opportunity to kind of discuss this in World Water Awareness Month, because one of the challenges about talking about water scarcity, particularly in the UK, where we've just had the kind of wettest year on record, it's quite a challenge to then talk to people about why it's important that they preserve water. But it's a very real problem in this market. And I'll start with the UK because it's the market that I clearly know best. We're facing a major supply deficit that could lead to routine water shortages by 2050. So Sir James Bevan, who was the former chair of the Environment Agency, which is the regulatory body here in the UK, kind of plotted out the future demand that we have for water in this country, and the diminishing supply, and it makes for a very stark visual representation of the challenge. He called it the jaws of death, because in that relatively short time frame of 2050, we will be facing in some areas of the country routine water shortages, and that the reasons are, just as you said, Tom, climate change making weather patterns more unpredictable and water more difficult to manage. Groundwater's probably back to where it should be right now because of the seasonal weather patterns, but when you're experiencing kind of flash flooding, that doesn't necessarily replenish the groundwater in the way that we need it to. So changing weather patterns are an issue. Also, to be blunt with you, infrastructure development hasn't kept up with population growth, and that's particularly acute in the UK, where we have a privatised water industry and no new reservoirs built in the last 30 years. Pleased to say that there is kind of major infrastructure investment taking place now. That doesn't help us really where we are in 2025. This isn't a distant problem. In the UK is already preventing development and costing the UK some £25 billion over the course of the next 5 years in lost development because of water scarcity in particular geographies within the country. So a big area for growth here is around the Cambridgeshire and Cambridge-Oxford Triangle. That is one of the most water scarce areas of the country, and when you've got data centres going into these kind of high-tech parts of the country which are very water hungry, it's prevented major housing developments already. So that figure of 25 billion that I quoted has been modelled by the University of Manchester as part of their Enabling Water Smart Communities project, which is well worth a look. So that's the situation here in the UK. Big problem, despite the fact we've got grey skies and plenty of rain. In the EU, which perhaps is less of a surprise that water scarcity is an issue when you think of the arid south of the continent, 41% of the EU's population already is affected by water scarcity at some point in the year. And there's rising risks for both GDP and the economy, but also just ordinary settlement of citizens across the south of Europe. Just last year in Barcelona, which is a focal point actually for the bathroom industry, with some major suppliers based in that particular region. Barcelona faced a point of water crisis last year because their supplies reached such a low level. So that, these aren't distant problems. They're right here with us. And even in the US, 96 out of 204 river basins are forecast by the 2070s to face monthly shortages through the year. So water abstraction is going to become more difficult. We need to start addressing scarcity.
Just to add to that as well, I know that it's not a problem unique to that end of the world. In Australia as well, we're in a housing crisis. We don't have enough added new houses being built to cater for a growing population, but we also don't have enough water to feed those developments. So it isn't a problem unique to one country or one region. It is something that globally everyone is challenged by. So really kind of important to frame that in as a global context as well, and just say, well, everyone's facing water scarcity or changing water issues. The only difference is how it's impacting different regions and what solutions have been implemented there. Another key topic for the Windsor Declaration is antimicrobial resistance. So that's not a term that is used in the plumbing industry very often. It's kind of an emerging issue, probably more from a medical professional perspective, Tom. So I'm really interested to kind of delve into this and share a bit of insight as to what is antimicrobial resistance and what does it have to do with plumbing?
Yeah, I'm going to ask for everyone's patience on this one because I'm not a microbiologist by any stretch of the imagination. But this is something which has grown in prominence within the UK. It's still not a particularly well talked about issue. But just to summarise what antimicrobial resistance is, it's when microbes, bacteria, viruses and fungi no longer to respond to antimicrobial medicines. There's various different reasons why that is the case. Overuse of antibiotics, both in medicine and in agriculture, poor hygiene, and this is where our industry really comes in providing sanitation, and also low quality and poor application of medicine as well is a driver of AMR. Already this causes over 1 million deaths per year around the globe. So in many ways we can consider the next pandemic is already with us in AMR. It's expected to kill 39 million people between 2025 and 2050. So we're not talking about a trivial impact on humanity here. We're talking about something which creates an existential crisis for us. And that's just the direct effect. When you consider that modern medicine is completely dependent on being able to effectively treat infections through the use of antimicrobials, this has the potential to unravel a lot of modern medicine. So it's not just those 39 million direct deaths that we have to contend with. It's also the indirect deaths that we have to deal with as well. So AMR, as I say, I'm not an expert on this issue, but one thing I would say is do some research on it, because it is something which is here to stay, that we're going to be hearing more about, even if it's not on daily news bulletins right now.
Very important for the plumbing industry to be across what is the next challenge. Plumbers are generally on the front line of protecting the health and safety of the community with a lot of aspects, a lot of pathogens, and a lot of issues that really just are mitigated, or risks that are mitigated through the general work that's been done. And plumbing codes play a really important role for that. If you're compliant with the code, you might just be doing your daily job, but you don't realise some of those rules are in there for a particular reason, to protect the health and safety of the community. So it really brings your mind back to the importance of why the rules are the way they are, and why having modern plumbing codes, for example, is really important. I want to delve back into a little bit more on, I guess, how the bathroom industry, you represent a lot of bathroom product manufacturers. So how are they working towards solutions in these areas, and how they can implement water resilience strategies or deal with AMR as an issue?
Yeah, there's kind of two parts to this answer, Tom. One is the basic and one is the more advanced. So let's start with the basic. If you think about the origins of public health as a discipline, they go back to the identification by Dr. John Snow in the mid 19th century in Victorian London, where he identified a water pump, an infected water pump, as the source of the city's cholera outbreak. That basically was the birth of public health as a discipline, and that intervention, that understanding, and then the implementation of good sewage systems basically has eradicated cholera in the developed world. So plumbing can be the hero, and the delivery of good sanitation can make huge differences. In lower middle income countries, we still have situations where human beings are living without the level of sanitation that we're able to enjoy in the UK and the US and EU and Australia. There is lots that we can do around very basic levels of good sanitation and hygiene. And there's some fabulous brands within our membership like Sato, who are creating products that can be very easily deployed in those lower middle income countries. So that's the basic. In terms of the advanced, there's an awful lot that can be done to improve our products but through innovation. So if you think about the biofilm growth that is able to prosper in some of our fittings, what can we do by kind of changing the design of products to remove that risk of biofilm growth? And biofilm is basically a very rich habitat for these resistant microbes to develop in. So, what can we do to innovate there? That could be the use of UV, which is a great disinfectant within shower traps, for instance, as a potential idea. But there's other sources of infection like toilet plume. That when turbulence within the flushing toilet pan can create a plume of microbes into an environment where we have a toothbrush by the side of the tap. It makes you wince a little, but these are very basic things where innovations within our sector can make a big difference to improve hygiene, even in our economies. And just the basics of improving access to hand hygiene. A big bugbear and something that we've been doing some work on within the BMA is around optimum washrooms. How can we design washrooms in a way that is just going to make hand hygiene much easier? And we've all been in those washrooms where the touchless taps aren't working, or there's no drying facilities. There's maybe 15 toilets, 2 basins and 1 hand dryer. You've all been there and seen that. These are things that we can put right to improve hand hygiene and therefore reduce infection risk.
Yeah, I know a hot topic in the UK at the moment is the access to public facilities as well. But that's a rabbit hole we might not go down at the moment. But really just puts in your mind the challenges there, and when you think of if hand hygiene is a focus area, how can we improve it, and what are the limitations and challenges there? And it is so critical. We all learnt lessons through COVID, especially with hand washing and hand hygiene. So how do we keep those, or I guess implement some of those lessons learnt through the pandemic? Before we start delving into some of the solutions around some of these challenges, I did want to talk a little bit about the Windsor Summit. Can you tell us a little bit about what that was like? And for those who weren't familiar with the summit, it was held at Windsor Castle. So a pretty exciting and unique building to hold a plumbing event in. I would like to think that's not the first plumbing event in history that's ever been talked about there, but Tom, can you tell us a little bit about what it was like being in Windsor Castle for such a historic building and such a historic event for the plumbing industry?
Yeah, well, it was, first of all, I was in awe, as the other kind of participants were in awe of just the history involved in the venue. So we were actually conducted the meeting in St George's House, which is part of the kind of wider estate close to the castle. The Vicar's Hall, it's been kind of immortalised in the series The Crown. If you've seen The Crown, is the room where Prince Philip kind of establishes with the rector of St George's Chapel a facility for leaders to get together and have discussions that can kind of drive social change. So that was actually kind of covered off tangentially in that TV show. That's actually what we did. We managed to pull together, I think for the first time, 20 of the most senior people within the plumbing supply industry globally for a very frank, open conversation about these issues and what we could do about them. The room in which the meeting took place was over kind of 600 years old, so it was where Henry V planned the Battle of Agincourt. It was where Shakespeare first performed the Merry Wives of Windsor for Elizabeth I. So there was kind of the weight of history on us, really, to kind of raise our game as a group of leaders to kind of make history ourselves. And I think the Declaration really was quite historic in terms of pulling together.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think maybe in another 100 years, people will reflect on the first Windsor Summit, and it will go down in history like Shakespeare performing potentially.
Well, we can live in hope, Tom. Well, maybe not go that far, but
I'll put you up there with Shakespeare, Tom. Don't worry. So some of the exciting things that came of it, we got all the leaders together, we sat around in a historic venue. What actually came from there? What were the commitments from the leaders, and what direction came out of those discussions?
Yeah, first and foremost, there was a commitment to start raising these issues, raising awareness with them, with our respective stakeholders, whether that's government, consumers, the trades, the regulators that we all deal with on a day-to-day basis. So there was a commitment to actually raise the profile of these two issues. There's a commitment to innovate, because there's an understanding that actually there's a duty on us as fittings manufacturers to be part of the solution. So commitments to innovate. There was also a list of questions to policymakers around this is the environment that we need from a regulatory point of view in order to be able to make those innovations and those breakthroughs. Labeling, I think, is something we're going to come on to shortly, Tom, but that's one good example where a kind of unified way to deliver water efficiency information to consumers would be one way which could help manufacturers to innovate even faster and further. So there was a list of requests to government as well, supporting organisations like the BMA, like ICC, several other trade associations and certification bodies signed up to kind of provide a supporting role in all of this. And we also agreed informally that this was the thing, and we're going to be coming together again in the future and doing work in between to kind of benchmark the progress of the industry. So it's not just getting together, signing a form and forgetting about it. This has produced some active work that we're going to monitor and hopefully drive progress with.
We should mention the declaration itself as well. So it isn't just a piece of paper that everyone signed and said, okay, yeah, we'll work towards this. I think there's some pretty strong commitments in there from a lot of the industry's leaders around the world to really progress and drive this forward. So mainly focused on manufacturers as the drivers of some of these changes. Really want to delve in, okay, what are some of the product-specific solutions that we can work on or focus on as an industry to help reduce infection risks or water wastage, or some of those challenges that we're trying to focus in on through the declaration. Can you talk us through, from a manufacturer's perspective, what are some of these solutions that they'll focus on through this work?
Yeah, absolutely. So this isn't an exhaustive list, and if anyone's got any great ideas, no one's got a monopoly on great ideas, so chuck them into the pot. We want to hear all about them. But things like touchless taps and kind of really democratizing that technology and getting it out in other settings, I think is one idea that was discussed. Flush systems that reduced hand contact with the WC. So obviously there's already infrared flushes on the market, but mainstreaming those in all settings and looking at other ways, or including automatic mechanisms for flush. Improving the flushing technology and the hydrology of flushing itself to reduce toilet plumes. Already there's smart toilets that automatically close the lid, so the toilet plume becomes a lesser issue. But equally, innovating use of new surfaces and technologies to reduce that biofilm buildup. I mentioned earlier shower traps for an example, but also basins that reduce splash. If there's a biofilm buildup in a tap or faucet, then the minute that liquid is splashed out around the room from a basin, that creates issues, particularly in the healthcare setting. So innovation around kind of types of basin can help here. I've mentioned surfaces that inhibit microbial growth. Copper is a fantastically resistant material to microbial growth, but there are others, and there's some pretty innovative and novel materials coming to market as well. The key is always you don't want to be having antimicrobial coatings necessarily, because they may contribute to the further development of the problem. But also on the water efficiency side, kind of leak resistant toilets, toilet leakage is something that we must address. It's something that we're looking at very closely in the UK and working with DEFRA, our regulator, on. Just the fundamental intrinsic design fault of having a seal over a hole that can be easily interrupted is something that we must kind of address and find a solution to. Low flow isn't nearly as widely adopted as it could be, so improving low flow to ensure that the experience isn't compromised. And I know a certain figure in high office recently commented in quite a derogatory fashion about low flow fittings. We must ensure that that isn't a consumer experience, that they only have a positive experience, and we know from innovations coming out from our members that actually they can deliver a great experience with a limited kind of literage in use. So these are potential things. One of the things I'm most excited about, Tom, that is already on some markets and is near to the UK market, is recirculating showers. So I think that is a great way to deliver a great showering experience, and showering is so experiential with a fraction of the water use, that I'm really excited about those products coming to market.
You mentioned a good point there, Tom, as well, that a lot of these issues you can work towards a solution, but you may solve one problem and cause another. So there's a degree of importance of considering all the factors and consider these issues holistically to make sure that that's not the experience as you go through and look at one particular problem. You might find that further down the line in plumbing, you may cause another. So a really important point. And I do know a number of manufacturers are already working closely with academia to try and tackle some of these challenges in their distinct fields of products. So really interesting times to see where some of these innovations go. I know there's a lot of PhD candidates focusing their expertise in this field. So it's really exciting times in the plumbing industry to see new academics specialising in plumbing as a field in all the various different aspects. So exciting times ahead for us, and I think we haven't focused as an industry on research for so long that it's really exciting to see that shift change now, and some of the findings and the lessons that we'll learn through that process is really going to be exciting and driving the industry forward. We've got a question in the chat that I'll pose to you, Tom, from your experience, and I might add to it as well. But is the cost primarily prohibitive factor for advancements in desalination efforts, or perhaps using reclaimed or recycled water for services such as cooling or cloud servers and data and those kind of water intensive industries where it may not need to be drinking water quality. Do you have any thoughts around that, around shifting industry's use of water and really delineating between what quality of water we need for what application?
Yeah, I think on desalinisation, the thing that seems to be prohibitive towards adoption in the UK and mainstreaming of desalinisation, given that we're surrounded with sea, it's the obvious solution really. But the what's prohibitive is twofold. One, the cost. It's huge upfront capital costs, which I think there's an unwillingness part of consumers to bear that cost through water bills and so on. The other factor is carbon. It's quite carbon intensive. So certainly in the UK, there's a statutory target to reach net zero by 2050. Whether or not we'll hit that, I'm not sure. But certainly, if we were to switch to desalinisation to meet our water demand, I think that would be a struggle because it's quite carbon intensive. I'm not an expert on desalinisation, but I think also some of the chemicals that are involved aren't necessarily always easy to source. But I stand corrected from anyone that knows more about desalinisation than I do. But those two factors of the carbon intensity and the cost seem to be the major barriers. Whether there was wider adoption and it drove down the cost, that might be a different equation. In terms of use of reclaimed or recycled water, now we've got different experience in our two respective markets here, haven't we, Tom? Because there's pretty low adoption of these systems in the UK at a domestic level, and that is mainly because of developer costs and developer margins. They're already pretty squeezed in the UK in terms of the margin or claim to be. So that is a major problem with adoption. But I gather that where there's a bit more of a regulatory driver in Australia, there's wider adoption. Is that right?
Yeah, it is an option used, but I wouldn't say it's widely used here from a domestic perspective, especially. It's something that we're trying to encourage people to consider more when designing buildings. And the ICC itself is doing a lot of work in that space to try and provide appropriate design solutions and really enable the use of these type of recycled water or reclaimed water in different ways, in the appropriate ways as well. In Australia, there's a lot of infrastructure-based recycled water reuse, but I guess that's from a utilities perspective on using water for the right application, but not as much domestic uptake as I think we could do as an industry. And I think it's a wasted resource if we can't reuse it twice and get the most out of our water. So yeah, it's a really good question. Thanks, Ty, for asking. Really important kind of considerations when you're looking at water efficiency, reuse, and all these kind of factors that really look to solve water scarcity as a problem. I'll jump.
There's some really good research.
There you go, Tom.
Sorry, Tom. There's some really good research underway in the UK actually on community level reuse and sustainable urban drainage systems, which hopes to shed a bit more light on this, how they can kind of make it all add up for all the different stakeholders that are involved. Ultimately, if there's some regulation, that always drives, it creates a market and drives things.
That's a good segue to my next question for you, Tom, when it comes to regulation. So we through the summit had a lot of industry leaders there, but the kind of missing piece to the conversation is government, and how do you see their role in creating change here? Is it a policy change, or is industry just going to lead it themselves? How do you see the role of government playing out for this initiative?
Yeah, I think that's such a great question for now as well, because there's so many competing demands on government, whether that's the economy, bluntly, war. The carbon agenda has kind of dominated for so many years. Where does water even feature in discussion? So, the first thing would be to pay some attention to this issue, because if you haven't got water, then you can forget about all those other things, because water is absolutely the basis for all of those other human activities. So that would be the first thing I would say. There's some pretty sensible things that governments can do around kind of supporting the research and development of innovation in water efficient and hygienic products that perhaps are just too distant from commercialization. And in the UK, that's one thing that we have got right at the moment. There's the water regulator is funding £500 million into a water efficiency fund. That's really useful for kind of doing some of the research and development on things that perhaps aren't commercial and businesses wouldn't do off their own bat. So that's helpful, and that body of understanding and that data can then drive more commercial innovation within businesses. I'd say a stronger regulatory framework that really drives the phase out of inefficient bathrooms and promotes the adoption of newer, more efficient bathroom fittings would be a big thing. Public I talked about regulator and government awareness. Public awareness is even less prominent. Any efforts to educate consumers through public information around water conservation and hygiene would be welcome. And another thing, which, as I say, we've got a privatised water industry in the UK, the outlier really. Most companies have at least municipal water systems, but I think something that unites everyone is that our water infrastructure needs to be modernised. Here in the UK, we suffer from quite poor water pressure, unlike our friends on the continent. But most water efficient shower heads, for instance, operate at 3 bar, and you'll have to do the conversion for me, Tom, because I'm not sure what that is in PSI. But in many areas of the country, we're not getting even a third of that. So we need good water infrastructure in order to drive those even greater water efficiency gains and ensure sustainable management. So there's some things that government can do.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a problem not unique to the UK either. I think every country has different challenges when it comes to infrastructure as well, whether it be the age or the materials used, or pressure problems, or even just being able to extend their infrastructure networks based on the availability of water. So different problems in different regions, and I guess that's the same when it comes to considering desalination and recycled water, or the use of rainwater harvesting, for example. Different solutions are going to be more suitable to different countries or different climatic conditions. So it's kind of combating different challenges from different countries, but the big positive through events like World Water Awareness Month is actually sharing this knowledge, and what might be a solution in one country might actually be a solution for another, and we can share our knowledge that way. And these types of forums is a really good opportunity to start promoting those conversations and knowledge sharing. So you did mention efficiency, and I want to delve into that a little bit more, because looking at the people in the call, there's people from all over the world. Everyone's got different experiences and different schemes that water efficiency labelling works under. Me being based in Australia, then I'm used to the water efficiency labelling standards scheme, which is mandatory in Australia. So every water using product like toilets, taps, washing machines, those kind of things, all have a mandatory label on it. But that's different in different countries. We've got Water Sense in the US. But I want to delve into the Unified Water Label Association, since we're both board members, Tom. Start talking about what is the power, I guess, from a consumer's perspective to make informed decisions through that water label, and why is it so important?
Yeah, so the Unified Water Label is a voluntary scheme which operates is mainly in Europe, including the UK, but it's in other markets as well. And it just provides very legible and understandable information on the water use credentials of a product. So for a shower, the litres per minute of that shower, and some form of scale to give you an indication. So for the average person, they don't necessarily know whether a 5 litre a minute shower is highly performing or a guzzler. So a scale to give an indication of how it's performing. The really important thing isn't really the design of the label, it's the technical criteria that sits behind it. And the great thing about a unified water label is it's got such a robust testing criteria that it ensures that there's a minimum efficacy of the product, as well as just performing at a certain flow rate or flush volume. So that's an important thing. But it's just providing that information, and one thing that we can see from the product that's been registered on the scheme since it was established in 2008 is how much it's driven market transformation. It's really that by the fact that people put their products on the label and the database, and you can see them side by side, that's driving manufacturers to make the right sorts of innovations. And sure, there's still very high consuming products available out there on the marketplace, but everyone wants their products to be marked up in the green category and the highest performing products. In the UK, we are heading towards mandatory labelling. There is some debate at the moment on what that looks like, whether it's going to be a new UK only scheme. Our line as an industry is we're quite happy to see mandatory labelling, but please let's not reinvent the wheel and do something different that just leads to a proliferation of SKUs for manufacturers, because that just adds cost to the consumer. It's a headache for our government to develop it when something already great exists. So just use that, take the UWL off the shelf and use that as the mandatory labelling requirement. But all of the schemes have got their merits, and that they all serve to provide great information to consumers to help them make informed choices.
Yeah, I think the thing not to underestimate is the power of that consumer choice, and the power that those kind of schemes have on manufacturers to really innovate and drive change. It's been quite transformational in Australia, where the scheme has been mandatory for a long number of years now, and to see what's changed, and also what are the savings over that period of time as well in water usage. So yeah, some significant numbers, and I know that the Wells Administration in Australia advertise that fact quite well, and the numbers do change each year, but it's a pretty significant amount of water saved through such a simple initiative. So I did want to raise the importance of that, and how that factors in on dealing with these issues. Another great comment from Ty around water consumption and industrial and agricultural use, and as data centers become more common as a huge water using industry, it is difficult for, I guess, water authorities to manage their assets and where that water is being used, and increasing population, more housing, more industrial usage, the emergence of data centers, all these kind of things play a real juggling act for those infrastructure agencies. And I think the one opportunity that there is for the plumbing industry here is to look at water reuse, look at rainwater harvesting, and think of it as giving building owners a degree of independence from the infrastructure, to say, well, whilst you have water supplied to your building, and maybe that water is quite cheap now, that might not always be the case as we delve more into these challenges, and water might not always be cheap. So some of these solutions and innovations that are happening can actually give buildings a degree of sovereignty from the infrastructure, and so you can be the manage your own asset here, whether it be rainwater harvesting or water reuse, and you can actually reduce your dependence on that infrastructure. Whereas other industries that might be a bit more of a challenge. So it's another great point to kind of raise through this discussion. one thing we haven't touched on, Tom, is sanitation. So another really big challenge that's tried to be worked on for many agencies for many years. So it's great to see the Windsor Declaration bring industry together on this challenge as well. The main thing I wanted to talk about in that aspect is investment. So I guess, can you talk us through why investment is such an important aspect when you're considering sanitation, especially for the low and middle income countries or states or regions? Why is that investment so important, and what can be done to help bolster a solution here?
Yeah, well, but pure and simple lack of access to clean water, whether that's for drinking or washing, leads to outbreaks of disease. It's clear as day. It doesn't require too much explanation. So that's why it's important. Sanitation infrastructure is fundamental to removing those risks of disease outbreak. Improved infrastructure, whether that's individual bathrooms, communal bathrooms, it enhances the public health in the communities where that infrastructure is put in place. It enhances the economic development of those communities as well. In terms of how we get there, then partnership as manufacturers, it's our duty to innovate solutions that are as cost effective as possible in order to just lower the barriers to entry for people to invest in this sort of infrastructure. But there's also key partnerships with local governments and with NGOs to accelerate the impact. I think this is why this has been recognised for a really, really long time. It's why the UN has good sanitation and clean access to water as its sustainable development goal number 6. As responsible manufacturers, we just need to contribute in any way that we can to that whole agenda, and some of the largest manufacturers in the world are already doing that. I've mentioned Sato already, but others are involved with projects to kind of really drive forward the adoption of good sanitation around the world, because it's so vital.
It definitely is, and it kind of leads into my last question for you, Tom, to wrap up this session, and I'd argue one of the most important questions for you. We've got people all over the world dialing in live. We've got people that are going to watch this video recording later on through YouTube and other forums. And an important message to get out there is how can everyone get involved in some of these solutions and support things like the Windsor Declaration, whether individually or through their companies. How can we mobilise and work together as an industry to work towards some of these solutions?
Yeah, well, I mean, first and foremost, I'm going to post a link in the chat in a moment, which will take you directly to the Windsor text, so you can see what we've been talking about, but also so you can sign up. So if you're a brand or you're a supporting organisation, then you can sign up to become a signatory of the declaration alongside all of those absolutely massive global bathroom companies. So we're welcoming further signatories. If you have a role as an inspector or as a plumber or as someone involved in codes development, then you've got a key role as well to play by just having the conversation. When someone is kind of talks about AMR, and we've had this conversation a few times, Tom, haven't we? Quite often the natural instinct to say is, oh, AMR doesn't really mean much to me in my market. It doesn't really resonate. Kind of, we as a global plumbing community have a duty to actually start talking about it and raising awareness of it, because it's something we can do something about. But more to the point, it is going to create an existential threat for us if we don't address it, and it goes way beyond boundaries. The viruses, as we've already found out in a not too distant past, viruses don't really respect boundaries. So we got to work together on all of this stuff. Let me post the link please do head there to check it out. In the fullness of time, and this is something we're working really closely with ICC on, there will be a new entity created to continue to drive forward the Windsor Declaration, a standalone entity that's independent of any individual company or trade body. So there will be opportunities to engage in that industry-wide collaboration through that new body in the future. So keep your ear out. I'm sure ICC will join in BMA in publicising all of that work as it develops. But yeah, do get involved.
That's a good point, Tom. So from the ICC's perspective, there's a really important way to keep across what's happening here, and anyone that's already subscribes to the ICC's PMG newsletter would have seen articles that we've written together around the declaration and where to go. So it's really important, I guess, to highlight that is a really good opportunity for ongoing engagement and where this goes, and how you can contribute to that initiative, and kind of what the roles of different agencies play in this. And I'm looking through the participants list, and we're fortunate to have national code writing bodies from around the world actually on the call. We have plumbers, we have inspectors, we have a nice mix of the industry around the world on the call now. So two really good ways to keep that engagement going and keep actually get involved in some of the solutions, because this is an industry-led initiative. Government has their role to play, but this has been initiated by industry for industry to really drive a solution forward. So two really great opportunities to get an understanding of what the declaration is, become a signatory, find out how you can be involved from your different industry sector, but also keep across what's happening here through the newsletter and through other channels. The ICC will definitely be keeping our stakeholders up to date on what's happening, and really trying to mobilise everyone together as an industry to work towards those solutions. And that's the last.
It's a rare case where we're not asking for any money either, are we, Tom? We're just asking for your time and effort and emotional investment. But if you've got some money that you want to throw at it as well, that's great. That's it.
But there's a lot of knowledge in the virtual room as well, so good opportunity to share that. We've got all the major manufacturers in there, and really that's a great contribution from them towards solutions, as well as what they're already doing in partnership with academia to drive us forward. But yeah, there's a role for everyone to play in this initiative, and really looking forward to working with different groups in making that happen, and seeing if we can solve some of these challenges that the industry is facing and has been worked on for many years. But I think together we can really drive it forward and make some meaningful change there. But we've got through all the comments in the chat and all the questions that I've had for you, Tom. So I'll wrap up and just thank you for your time. I know it's late in the evening for you. It's early in the morning for the people on my side of the world. So I do thank everyone for joining at different times around the world, and thank you, especially Tom, for sharing your knowledge and your time with us today.
No, thank you, and everyone else on the call as well for sticking with us, and yeah, hope to hear from you.